Hey everyone, it's Helen from S&B Deal Hunter. Today we have Chandra Rao with us, an entrepreneur who has done 7 acquisitions primarily in the construction space. Super excited to hear Chandra's story today. Chandra, it's great to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
I guess first talk to us about your background and how you even got into this. What were you doing before?
Yeah, I'd say it's a little bit of luck. So I went to grad school in Pennsylvania, moved out to Chicago, and worked in tech for a number of years. And in 2013, I had a good friend of mine from undergrad reach out, say he had a startup and he needed some investment for this company. It was a SaaS-based inventory management company. And so he was my friend. He's groomsman at my wedding. Great guy and really, really intelligent guy. This is a guy who used to work for the NSA. So I thought, you know what, there's no safer place to put my money than invest in this guy. So invested in that. Over the course of the next year, it wasn't necessarily taking off the way he thought it would. He had other projects that he really wanted to push and develop, and um, you know, built up a little bit of debt from the company and said, "Well, do you want to buy the rest of the business?" It was cash flowing. Thought, yeah, I'll just refinance the debt with credit cards. So I had a bunch of 0% APR credit cards, put the balance on those, and that was off to the races. The debt cleared up pretty quick from cash flow of the business. It was easy reoccurring revenue, and I thought of, hey, a new model of entrepreneurship. Um, Over the course of time, I think I pulled out a decent amount of money, went on great vacations. I honestly did not know what I had because if I look back and think, man, I had a SaaS business that was generating a decent amount of reoccurring revenue, I could have sold it and retired. But I kind of let that thing go just basically for the customer list. But it did change my perspective of investing. Like here, I've outperformed the S&P 500. Let's look at buying companies versus just just putting money into kind of the safe place.
Wow, 0% APR credit cards. I see a lot of ads where people are like, you can, do this credit card stacking strategy and like buy a business with zero down and unlock 300K.
It
You
was
actually
it
went and
was
did it.
it was 2014. It was a different time. And
Wow.
I still
And
continue to work in tech, and I worked for a small startup that ultimately went kind of was a rocket ship for of growth. But that pivotal moment of, hey, here's a different approach, I think definitely changed my perspective.
that's crazy. Do you recommend that approach for people who are going down this path? Or have you done it again since?
No, it was wildly reckless. But I was in my what was I still in my late 20s, not a care in the world. So I still had my W-2 job. So it made sense. That and the cash flow of the business was more than enough to take care of the debt. But buying something on credit cards is not something I would suggest again.
Oh,
That's for
that's
sure.
crazy. And what happened next? You were still working your W-2. Now you own 6 businesses, I think. What happened after that? Like, how did you kind of transition full time into buying?
Yeah, so over the course of a couple 18 months, 2 years, I'd let that SaaS business go. I was working for a startup. It was also in the SaaS space. It was a company called Coupa. So basically, it managed, big organizations needed to spend money through the platform, any non-payroll dollars. Ultimately, they would save money. And the company had gone through an IPO, so I had some additional capital, and it's like, all right, well, now let's get back to the other strategy of buying companies. So I partnered with an old friend of mine. We had known each other for some 15 plus years. He lived in Minnesota. I lived in Chicago. It made sense that we would look for a business in Minnesota that he would ultimately run. So that was how we came to our first acquisition. It was a company called Gopher Electrical Construction. My business partner, Colin, he has much more of a construction background and really an understanding of construction. I, to this day, do not. I can maybe talk at a very high level, but I'm not going to be the brains of that operation. Um, but he took over the operations role for that company, and then we were off in terms of, hey, how do we grow this thing? How do we, take the lessons learned and apply it to the future and all of those kinds of things.
And did you already know you wanted to buy something in the construction space when you were looking for deals? How
Definitely not.
how did you find the deal? How did you finance it? Like what did that look like?
Yeah, so this first deal was, hey, let's buy anything. Let's look at anything that has a good multiple on it. So construction typically has lower multiples. And that was the basis of our decision. So we were not extremely strategic in the first acquisition. I think we were looking at any and all deals.
Got it. And I guess with this one, what did you like about it? When it was a great multiple, or are there other things you liked about the
Yeah,
business?
it was, when we looked at the data, it was producing a decent amount of cash. We got it for a pretty low dollar amount, and looking back, there was a reason why. So we bought the company for $500,000. It was producing I want to say it was initially on the teaser docs, it was above $500,000 of cash flow. Uh, so immediately we're like, we found the infinite loop of money. This is great. Um,
And
but
what happened and how did you diligence the deal? By the end of diligence,
not well.
were you still
So
like there's 500K of cash flow, or yeah,
yeah,
what were you looking at when you were actually going through diligence?
so this is one of those things where we learned by doing, and we diligenced it by really just looking at the QuickBooks files, and then some of the bank statements. That was it. We did not do a Q of E. We didn't do cash proof. It was really looking at internally created docs, from the seller, and it turned out that the some of the where we took over the business, there were a lot of things that impacted cash flow. I'll give you an example. So these are big construction projects, and a majority of the profit is made in the first 60% of the project. It's called rough-in. We took over projects where a lot of the rough-in was complete, and so we were doing the parts of the project that were very little to no profit. So we were operating on a very thin margin to start. So it was just kind of the lessons learned of, well, what does it mean to actually do due diligence? We're not well versed in it. We just kind of jumped in head first.
Got it. And how did you finance the deal?
So we came to the table with, I want to say, I think it was $160,000 between both myself and Colin, and then we did seller financing for the rest. I think the structure of the seller note was a 5-year note with a 10-year AM. So a
Mm,
balloon payment on the 61st month.
got it. And I guess that was the first deal. You learned a lot. What happened, I guess, after a year, where was the business?
Continued learning, I would say. uh, we often joke that we look back the last several years, and we sum it up as mistakes were made. But we survived it, right? And we're now on the other end making better acquisitions. But it was definitely a few times getting kicked in the teeth before we got the hang of it.
I
Um,
guess I guess with that business, you mentioned you don't come from a construction background. What was your role in it? Did you move and work in the business full time? How did you guys split the roles?
so Colin pretty much managed the entire business. My role was more on the finance side, just looking at where we were performing, things along those lines. As we made other acquisitions, I started full time, I think in 2021.
Oh, wow.
Um, yep. So it was a good 3 year clip of um, Colin managing. We did bring on another partner, which was another mistakes were made highlight. And then after we made our underground construction acquisition, I worked in that business full time and maintained my W 2 for about a year and a half.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
crazy. So the first, I guess, we spoke about the first business. Tell us about some of the other ones you later acquired. Did you guys always know you wanted to kind of build up a portfolio of these? That was always the plan, and you always knew it was just one after another, or did you kind of want to see like how did this one go, and then we'll see if we want to do more?
We did want to build. So the thought process was, all right, let's build it organically, let's use retained earnings and buy the next one. Let's just keep on basically using the snowball method. So our second acquisition was in January of 2020, and um, it was another electrical contractor. So we thought, all right, we're going to try this roll up. Basically, that was a company called Miller Electrical, and that ended up being kind of the name that we've used for our subsequent acquisitions. So kind of pop
Yeah,
the big
love
red
it.
M. Um, what we did there was we bought the company. We ended up bringing the seller from the first acquisition in as a partner. So we needed to have somebody with a license, a master electrical license, in the business, and we thought, well, let's lock him up with equity. That was a fairly big mistake, primarily because we were not aligned in terms of our goals, not aligned in terms of cultural or ethical fit, things along those lines. So it was a big challenge that we faced for the next 2 years until we ultimately bought him out.
And was this the third partner you're talking about earlier?
Yes, yes.
And tell us, I think a lot of people ask me, I want to buy this business, requires a license. Sort of, what are the options? I don't have a license. You mentioned you brought the other seller in as a partner, and were you kind of like, did he have a real role in the business? What are some of the other options you considered?
Yeah, so he was typically sales, so he was still in that first business. He was the salesperson, and we thought, well, we need to maintain sales. Let's lock him up with a share of equity. But I think the biggest thing that we learned from this is that when you're bringing in a partner, you have to be aligned on your goals and having those open conversations around, well, what does the future look like? What does the next 5 to 10 years look like? If we're going to be really, I mean, this is going to be the closest relationship we have outside of our family. So we have to be aligned in that as well as our values. And there was a pretty big mismatch there. Um, and I say that because we found out after we bought him out, he was kind of a jerk to work with. So a lot of the employees, the team members, we were seeing significant churn. Um, so then made sense for him to exit the business. And when we did a little bit of a deep dive into what he was doing, he was funneling money out of the business. So
Oh,
when I
wow.
say ethical fit, it was, well, he's kind of really focused on self gain.
That's crazy. That's very unfortunate. In terms of, alignment on goals, what were you guys kind of looking for? Was your end goal always cash flow? You mentioned a roll up, so maybe there was an exit play here. What were kind of his goals going in?
I think his goals were more self focused, um, and though at a very high level, we would it would seem like we were aligned, but I think as we would dig deeper, we'd see that that wasn't necessarily the case. He was in a different stage of life. He was a bit older. He had some maybe other commitments, things like that. But I think the biggest things to look for are, well, what kind of history does this person have? Do they have any challenges with any regulatory bodies? So, came to find out he had a lot of challenges with the IRS, some legal troubles, and I think had we really taken a moment to digest this, we would have thought, well, maybe it's not just a bad luck issue. It's a character issue.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So,
You
so
mentioned,
I
all the, go ahead,
oh, go
sorry.
ahead.
I was gonna say with the first two deals seems like, very challenging, especially with the same seller that you got involved in both. Um, I guess after a couple years, what prompted you to continue to buy more of these businesses? At that point, why were you not like, this is not for us? Or were you just like, this is an isolated incident?
I guess gluttons for punishment. No, I we saw that the model could work, and we really had to dial in, and we learned this from our, we had another two successful acquisitions in 2020. So that's when we purchased our underground construction company and our fiber splicing division. To date, those companies have, I mean, I would say that the combined is probably a 5x growth rate.
Wow.
So they've been very, very successful. What we kind of saw in the, following 2 years before we bought that third partner out is that if we are aligned on our values and we try to build something that is really culture forward, then this could be something really special. That's what kind of prompted us to really start to push to try and get him out of the business.
No, that makes sense. For the other two successful acquisitions, that also happened in 2020, how did you kind of approach those differently, pre-close that you think maybe would have led to more success? What did you learn from those first two deals that you kind of
Sure.
applied?
Yeah, and I mean, I would say even the second deal was successful. It was more that we experienced employee churn because of that third partner, and it was his management style. No, I think nobody wants to work for somebody who's going to be kind of a jerk to him.
100%.
Yeah, and in 2020, thinking back, there was a lot of uncertainty then as well, right? We're just experiencing COVID, and I think when we closed our underground construction business, it was May, so we had, like, the world had just stopped, and so there was some uncertainty there, but we really focused on, hey, what kind of partnerships make sense for this business? Um, it looks like everybody's going to be working at home for a while. ISPs are going to be expanding their networks. Let's really push forward in that. So that's one of the reasons why I think that was successful.
What did you guys like about, I guess, the underground construction business and fiber splicing? First of all, what is fiber splicing? Why don't you tell us that first?
Sure. So essentially, it's when fiber optic cable is burned together so that light and essentially data can pass through. So if you're at your house and you have fiber coming to your house, they have to splice that fiber to essentially get you a connection so that you can go out and get high speed internet.
Got
Um,
it.
so think of it as the underground construction company will put the fiber in the ground. The fiber splicers will be the technical side to really make sure that that cable is getting you the speeds, getting you the connectivity that you need.
For these deals, how did you identify them? And were you kind of on the lookout for something, in construction? Because you, I guess, had already owned, one and then two businesses in the space, or what was that like?
Yeah, so we were constantly browsing biz buy sell. And
Love
we've
that.
gotten we had also taken the time to build some relationships with local brokers. Now it is, you know, for our last deal, our banker brought us the deal. But we will talk to anyone and everyone saying, hey, we are looking to acquire um, a business that fits into the platform, as long as it is the right cultural fit, as long as, we have the right team members who are interacting with each other, things along those lines.
I guess tell us more about, what drew you to this industry as a whole. The first one was kind of you just anything that fit the general sort of like cash flow criteria. It was a good deal, right, on paper. But I guess subsequently, after running these businesses, what do you like about them? Why would you suggest someone else get into this space or not?
Sure. I think after we made the first two acquisitions, since they were in construction, we decided, hey, this is going to be the platform. now we want to have bolt-ons for additional construction companies. So the underground construction company made sense because there was some uh, work that the electrical company did that was outsourced or subcontracted out to different underground construction companies. So we thought, well, let's try to bring everything in-house. That, and we'll diversify the types of work that we're doing. So that was really what drove us to this acquisition, along with this thought of, hey, we're going to see expanding networks. There's still so much coax cable that's in the ground. There's still so much. I think even as late as what was it late as last year, there were reports that some of the cable that AT&T had put in the ground, was contaminating groundwater because it had a significant amount of lead. So we saw it as this play of, hey, we're going to be able to upgrade infrastructure from existing providers as well as support new providers in the marketplace. So it was really like, hey, this is growing. The rising tide lifts all boats.
And have you felt that rising tide?
Yes, in those businesses we have, and it's been helpful in that it's funded some of our other acquisitions as well. So if one of the businesses is slow, we've got one of the other divisions to ultimately pick up the slack and help keep things moving forward.
That's great. Just like diversifies things for you.
Yes, yes.
That's awesome. And I guess with no, that's really cool that there are a lot of these potential projects that you're seeing, but who are your customers now? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so for the underground construction space, we see, they're typically going to be tier two or tier three ISPs. Likely they've gotten some grant money from either the state or at the federal level. I know that at the federal level, pending the next administration, that may or may not get cut. But we do see a lot of support from the state of Minnesota. That, and then those organizations are also putting dollars to grow organically. So they've got their own budgetary constraints for construction just to grow, and then they've got supplements from the governing bodies around. So it's that part has been fantastic. On the electrical side, we have general contractors who are doing big multifamily builds, apartment complexes, townhomes, etc., or hotels, and will do the electrical work for the much the broader project. And then our latest acquisition is service electrical. So that is residential. It's commercial service, meaning, hey, I'm calling you because I have an outlet that's out. I need help, or I need to get my panel replaced. Please come and help me. So it's a pretty wide customer base across the portfolio of businesses.
And how have you managed to integrate all these different deals and acquisitions, if at all? It seems like there's a lot of synergies here. Do you feel like, have they been realized? What's kind of your experience been there?
I think we're continuing to realize them. So we have, for most of the businesses, a shared back end. So we have a shared accounting system, shared AP, shared AR, just kind of that shared service center built out. We did close on an acquisition about 45 days ago. We are looking at maybe a 6-month to a year timeframe before we get them on the same ERP system, the same the same shared service that we have for the other businesses. I think there is still some work to do to get kind of the full value of having the platform in place for some of the bolt-on stuff.
And have there been any sort of customers that have leveraged both services? Like, do you see that synergy yet, or?
A little bit. So we've seen where we would initially subcontract out some of the work that maybe the electrical side does to somebody else, or the underground side to someone else, because we have that capability in-house. We have a pretty big bench to draw from. So we've seen our customers respond with, "Oh, well, you're doing that in-house. I didn't know you had that capability." Oh, wonderful. We don't have to to run through meeting other team members or other companies or things along those lines. So it's been very helpful.
And now you're, I guess, multiple acquisitions in. What is your day-to-day role look like versus your partners? With these businesses that you acquired, did some of them have teams in place or management or anything along those lines? And
Yeah, so
what does that
so
look
we've
like?
we've worked, especially in this last year, to one roll out EOS across the businesses, which has been very helpful. We hired an integrator or kind of a president who's been tackling a lot of the challenges for us. Our day to day has been focused on coaching our leadership team. Um, I still pay attention to the financials on a monthly basis, maybe even more frequently, but I've got to learn to let go a little bit more. Um, but I think that's a most of it. It is really about coaching and enabling the leadership team and seeing how we can help elevate, whether that's through training or whether that's just through one-on-one interaction, just elevate the games for everybody who's involved.
Can you give an example of what, that day-to-day coaching would look like?
I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say day to day. It's just kind of overall in the scope. But if we have some younger team members who are in leadership positions. So one of our GMs, he's in his, you know, younger 30s, and he's managing a really fast growing business. It can be as simple as, hey, what are the challenges that you face? How, I'm trying to think of something very specific. Um, but if there's some specific employee or team member challenge they're running into, hey, how can we help one correct any challenges, or how can we help enable that person to ultimately do a little bit better? So it could be situation based, or it could just be, hey, long-term plans. What do you want to get out of your career? What do you want to achieve in the next 5 years? Those are all things that we have discussions on. And what we really try to do is flip the 5 year plan question on its head and say, okay, well, let's pretend that it's 2029. You've had the greatest 5 years you can imagine. What has to happen for that to be true? And so rather than just project out, oh well, my 5 year plan is X, let's pretend and look back. What has to happen for it to be true? And how can we enable those things to be true?
That's a no, that's a great way to approach I guess your management team. I'm gonna have to steal that one.
Feel free. I found
Um,
it works really, really well.
yeah, no, definitely. And I'm a big EOS fan as well. So I think that's huge for accountability, and I don't think you see it in small businesses as much. So props to you for implementing that. I'm curious with um these various sort of GMs you guys have in place, did you guys inherit them with the acquisitions? Did you bring in new leadership? What has that been like?
So it's yes and yes. So we have brought in new leadership for a couple of the businesses. We did inherit team members. I think in this space, the challenge comes when you have somebody who has been typically in the field and you bring them into an office role and say, hey, look, here are the things that I want you to focus in on. Sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't, and it requires a lot more hand holding.
And what's been your hiring process like when you have brought in new leadership from, outside the company?
And so we've changed this a little bit, and this is new this year. So we've started implementing a much longer hiring process. So, I'll give you the example of our integrator. We had been talking for I think 5 months, 6 months before we officially, made the decision for hiring. And so we start off with, just kind of a detailed, call it a get to know you session or detailed interview where we learn as much as we can about the candidate and they learn as much as they can about us. And it's not the tell me about a situation when you were challenged. That's what we used to do. Now it is much more open and just more of a dialogue. Hey, get to know us. And we want to get to know you at a deeper level. And we have multiple rounds of this. We will try to share, at least a meal or two with the candidate. So go out to lunch, maybe go out to dinner, things along those lines. Just kind of see people outside of the element. And then we do pose that 5-year question, right? Of, hey, look back at the last 5 years. If they've been absolutely incredible, what has to happen for that to be true? And I also think that's a good way to weed some people out, because they might say, hey, you know what? I want to be on a boat, and I've got my yacht. I'm sailing around the world. That is fantastic. That is a great goal to have. I don't know if I'm going to be able to help you achieve that goal. Or I'm flying around in my private plane. Great. I want you to. I want them to win. I want them to be successful, but I don't think that I'm going to be able to enable that. So those are all things that we kind of look for in those kinds of conversations. And then
And where
just
are
kind of
you
alignment on culture.
and where are you looking for these candidates? Where are you finding them?
Sure. So for our integrator, we had some interactions. She had worked in one of the vendors that we had dealt with. I think ultimately, and we have of course postings on ZipRecruiter and all of the nine, right? Of everywhere and every place. Referrals from existing team members, I think, are um, another source. And as a last resort, we do use headhunters, but that has been less successful.
Interesting. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think the working at the vendor referral from an existing team member, those are great ones. I feel like a lot of people don't explore. So
And I'll come back to, I'll probably say it till I'm blue in the face or until you tell me to stop talking about it. But when we focus on culture over everything else, we talk about our company values, and we really want to get buy-in from candidates. I think when we focus on that versus focusing just on experience, we have made the best acquisitions for talent. And when we focus just on experience, that's when we've fallen down a little bit.
I think that's 100%. How are you, like, I guess, what are some of your guys' values? I mean, you guys do EOS, so what are some of your core values?
Sure, the core values are ensure customer success, strive for excellence, and focus on results. And we have this, they're not just words on the wall, they're not just banners. Of course, we have them all around the office and the shop, but we try to put this into context of how team members are interacting with one another, with customers, with vendors, etc. And then from a candidate perspective, we like to try and give examples of this as we're going through the interview process. And we ask them to think about it as well, from how they're interacting with their existing team members at different organizations or existing customers, things along those lines. We really want to do a shift in terms of thinking. It's not just about the work you've done. I think that's fantastic. You bring a level of knowledge. Awesome. We need it. It is not just about the experience. It is so much more about the attitude and the adherence to those company values. So I'm a firm believer you can learn anything. People, as long as we have the training, people can learn anything with kind of the right thought process in mind.
100%. I mean, you weren't in construction, so I'm sure you definitely felt that way, and that's awesome. And that's I guess in terms of like the GMs or leadership that you did hire who had more like P&L ownership, how did you structure, I guess, their pay, incentivize them to sort of grow with you guys?
Sure. And this is something that we're putting more guardrails around now, because in the past, each business operated almost in a silo. And now that we've implemented EOS, or we're continuing to implement EOS, continuing to try and break down barriers or silos, we're starting to see more structure. But what we've tried to do is align, a comp or a bonus structure around performance of the business. So there is a percentage that is allocated to, the financial performance, and then there is a component that is how closely did you align to company values. So asking during the review process, give me an example of customer success here. Give me an example of striving for excellence or focusing on results, and let's talk through those. Where in over the course of the year did you fall down in one of those areas? What was it? What did you learn? So we really want to tie a block to company values in terms of that bonus, just to continue to push, be like, hey, this is really important. It is not just the words or sayings on a wall. And I think that's one way we get buy-in.
No, that's super smart. And I'm curious, earlier you mentioned the second and third acquisitions have seen like a 5x growth rate combined. What do you think were the main contributors towards growth of those businesses and I guess the subsequent acquisitions too?
Yeah, so I think there was once we have kind of a baseline of revenue, baseline of profitability in the companies, it starts to act like a flywheel, right? So we're not as concerned about making payroll or paying vendors. I'll give you the example. So in 2018, after we acquired our first business in January, in September, both my business partner and I were frantic trying to come up with working capital. We're like, oh, we underestimated working capital by a significant amount. Um, I tell the story of, I got married in September. I had put a lot of our wedding expenses on our credit card and, waiting to pay it off. Initially, it was just for the points, and then thinking, well, I need to use the saved wedding money to fund payroll.
Wow.
And, we had both Colin and I had put in, our last bit of liquidity into the business because we had some delayed payments. And it was a huge sigh of relief when we I came back from Virginia after getting married and there was a check there. I'm like, oh man, thank you. Get paid back and also keep the businesses running. So now, since we had that base covered, we're able to focus on growth and focus on not pulling any money out of the business for those other businesses as we acquired them.
That makes sense. And for the subsequent acquisitions, how did you guys finance and structure those deals? I guess the first one we spoke about, I think the second one you mentioned seller financing plus some amount just down from you guys. Did you guys leverage any other financing options later
Oh
on?
yes, absolutely. So the first one, you're right, seller financing and some capital at the table. The second acquisition, we did conventional financing through our banking partner. Same thing with the third and fourth. And fifth business, we did conventional financing for all of them. For our last acquisition, that's the first time we utilized the SBA, and we did it as part of an expansion loan because it was in the same kind of sector as our other electrical business.
And with the expansion loan, did you have to put anything down on that's great. People don't know about it, so.
So the beautiful thing about buying a like business, so that the way they classify a like business is going to be, do the NACES codes on your tax returns match? And I think they might have some flexibility, one or two digits off, but for the most part, if the NACES codes on your tax returns match, you can say, all right, this is an expansion of an existing business. This existing business is not too highly levered. Let's go ahead and finance this thing 100%. So you can do 100% financing, though it's rare, using that expansion loan from the SBA. We did a mix of the SBA and some seller financing here, just so that we had some skin in the game from our sellers.
And with that expansion loan, did they need to see that your other businesses were performing a certain way? It wasn't, I'm guessing, just based off the cash flows of the acquisition of the business you're acquiring.
Right. So it was a deep dive on our existing companies. I think it helped that, our existing banking partner is the one who did the SBA deal. So they were well aware of the performance of the business or the existing businesses. But yes, we had to prove that the existing companies could stand on their own and were performing the way we expected them to perform.
Talk to us a little, because not a lot of people go down, I think, the conventional loan route. Talk to us a little bit about like the pros and cons of going down that path versus SBA and why you decide to go down that path for multiple deals.
Sure. I would say it is a little bit easier. So there's there's less paperwork. No, I kind of joke about that. It is a little bit easier. Um, but we looked at the shorter AM times as a pro. So typically they're going to be somewhere in that 5 to 7 year amortization schedule. And we saw it as, hey, this is going to force us to be disciplined, to pay down debt quicker, things along those lines. We also have, I think, certain covenants. So the cons of this are you have to maintain certain, I guess, debt to income ratios. You have to maintain, even a customer concentration mix, things along those lines, where the bank is then made much more comfortable with kind of their liability. And if there is a high customer concentration, making sure you have the right AR insurance, things along those lines. There are definitely a lot of pros going with the SBA in that you don't have those same restrictions. But I think the pro here from the conventional standpoint is that it will force you to be much more disciplined in your approach.
And I'm guessing interest rates are a lot more favorable as well.
Correct. So the fees, SBA fees can be pretty heavy. Um, for the SBA deal we did, I mean, I think we had something like 150 or $160,000 of SBA fees. Um, that is not anything close to what you'd pay in conventional. So that is another pro of going the conventional route.
And how did you find a conventional lender that would do these acquisition deals?
So we had been working. So the company we've been working with is American National Bank. We have a really good relationship with our banker. His name is Kalen, so shout out to him. But he's been really helpful in not just in financing the deals. I think a lot of bankers are going to say, "Hey, yes, I can get this deal done." It is more about having another voice saying, I've done the analysis on this deal. It's a good one. Or I really want to have caution here. Here's the yellow or the red flags. Here's what I'm seeing. So seeing your banking, seeing your banker as your partner, not necessarily somebody who's throwing up roadblocks, is a huge, I guess, mind shift.
And I know people are going to ask this, so I'll just ask it now. But, did you have to take a personal guarantee on for those conventional loans?
Yes. So personal guarantee on the conventional loan as well as the SBA loan, and then all of the businesses guarantee one another. So for our expansion loan, as an example, for the deal we just closed, all of our Miller companies backed that loan. We still stay at a pretty healthy debt to income ratio, but yeah, if things go awry, we're definitely on the hook.
Yeah. How did you get comfortable with that?
I think risk in general is something that both my business partner and I feel comfortable with, and it is a risk that I think we have a lot of control over. Like if the businesses do experience some hardship, well, it's on us to try and figure out how to make it better, or how to find the solution. Um, but yeah, it seemed like a lot of the conventional debt, SBA debt, is going to require a personal guarantee. We can go out and try to raise funds. We can try to go out and raise different, maybe it's a convertible note, or get more comfortable with different types of debt. I think this was just the right path for us.
That makes
Um,
sense.
the other thing to note is that with the SBA, if you have, I think, significant real estate holdings, that's going to play a factor in whether you feel more comfortable with the SBA or with a conventional note. So anything that you have over a 25% equity stake in for real estate, the SBA is automatically going to take a second lien. Conventional debt, not necessarily the same thing.
That's interesting. And I guess with the subsequent acquisitions, beyond the first when we spoke about how did your diligence process change? You mentioned the bank just now is super helpful, but how did you guys, change up how you guys were running diligence?
Yeah, so I'll say that we've gotten really good at diligence since our last acquisition. So I mentioned we bought a trailer manufacturing company and then ultimately sold that business. That is the final nail in the coffin of, hey, let's be a little loose with diligence. So we,
Tell us a little bit,
we
I guess, give us some context on that. Why did you then decide to sell the business that you acquired?
sure. So we bought the business. We'd been, got an intro to the seller. We thought he was kind of a goofy guy, probably a jerk to his employees. So didn't fit that mold of culture to start with. So it's the first mistake of not trusting our gut. The other thing is he mentioned to us he had cancer. And this was something that he really wanted to get out of. He wanted to spend time with his family, etc. So we looked at the books, we sped through diligence. It was part of he had multiple entities in kind of the same set of books. So we were like, we're just carving out one section, which is this manufacturing business. And we came to find out after we've completed the purchase, after we've operated the business for a while, it required a lot of lift. So we spent a ton of time, money fixing that business because one, the books were inaccurate. They were to be kind. They were cooked. So it was a fraud to begin with, and then we also came to find out that we had the wool pulled over our eyes that he didn't necessarily have cancer, or he did
Wow.
not have cancer. Yes. So I
That's
think
that's a crazy thing to lie about, but
right.
like who does
And
that?
I think some of those guys can see that both my business partner and I, we are trusting to a fault. And also we look at this at the world and we say, all right, how can we help people? How can we make an approach that is positive for everybody involved? And I think sometimes there are folks that see that and think, okay, well, I can pull one over on them.
That's
You know, he
crazy.
he did. This
And
is going to
what
be a little bit of a plug for making sure you have a good seller note. So if you're going through the process and you have a good seller note and you find out there is fraud, you at least have something to claw back. So we use that technique. We at least got some money back from a seller note, or we didn't pay on it because there was some inappropriate activity going on.
was there
So make
anything you could
sure.
have done? Was there anything you could have done to identify some of these? I guess the
Oh,
books were,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. So we sped through diligence because we're bleeding hearts, right? We saw a guy who was older, and we thought, all right, he's saying he doesn't have much time, and he wants to spend it with his family. Okay, we'll speed through and we'll get this deal done. In hindsight, taking a little bit more care, even if we do speed through diligence, making sure that the right partners are involved. So in this case, at least getting a cash proof, or not a crazy in-depth quality of earnings, but at least getting some Q of E done, and then moving the ball forward. Um, After fixing the business, we sold it. A lot of it was based off of location. This is a business that was 2 hours away from where we lived, and neither one of us, so my business partner and I were basically neighbors. Neither one of us wanted to drive 2 hours to try and figure out employee or team member challenges or customer challenges or anything like that. So it required somebody who's going to be on site. Um, and so we fixed it. We upgraded the real estate, and we said let's sell it. Let's focus on our core. But that was a really big lesson learned in terms of culture, in terms of fit, making sure that the next acquisition falls really well in line with what our cultural values are, what our corporate values are, and how we can really expand the team from there.
And so I'm guessing now you're doing quality of earnings with every deal that you do.
Correct. You are correct. And
And
we're making sure we involve the right partners early in the process.
got it. Who are some of those partners?
So we use for our quality of earnings as well as our our accounting. We use a company called BWK. They're a fairly large company here in Minnesota, focusing on mid-size, small companies. They've actually got a good presence in the acquisition space as well. So they've helped us quite a bit.
Got it. And I guess I'm curious with the trailer manufacturing company, that seems unrelated to the other businesses you guys acquired. And I guess your thesis of building this roll up in I guess the construction space, what prompted
You're
you guys
correct.
to pursue it?
We fooled ourselves into thinking about, well, there's some synergy here. This makes sense. Um, at the time, construction trailers were hard to come by. They were, some 1 to 2 years out in terms of lead times. And we thought, well, if we're having a hard time, that means everybody else is having a hard time. We can manufacture these, we can have them for our own use, as well as sell to those who are waiting from the big manufacturers. Um, so it was really we fooled ourselves into thinking there was overlap, and it made sense in the portfolio of businesses. Um,
Got it, got it. Okay, that's super interesting. I guess in terms of future acquisitions, where I guess 5 years from now, where you want to be, what does that look like?
Sure. So I think that we're really going to continue to focus on both organic growth as well as, bolt-on acquisitions. What makes sense for the broader platform? So I'll give you an example. So our underground construction company doing really well. We're now launching organically an aerial division. So we put things in the ground and now we're going to start having team members hang them on poles. So we'll have a full array of service. So we have to find, from an acquisition standpoint, bolt-ons like that, or bolt-ons that make sense for the existing core. They'll just have additional value. Just it's not just the value of it being on its own, but what additional or accretive value can we get from that business? And once again, does it align with kind of the culture that we're trying to build on the onset?
No, that makes sense. Chandra, I know we went way over, but
Oh, we did.
thank you for your time. I don't want to take up more of your time, but any sort of final words of wisdom, especially for the first time business buyers that are going to be listening to this.
Yeah, I think there are a number of things. So one core takeaway, make sure your seller note is in place. You have a little bit of insurance. But it is not all sunshine and rainbows. Sometimes you do get kicked in the teeth, but it'll test your resolve. It'll test kind of how quickly you can get back up and keep moving forward. One of my favorite movies is Rocky Six. Rocky Balboa gives that speech to his son. I think that's important for every acquisition entrepreneur to listen to. So that'd be my advice.
All right, that's great advice. Oh, and final question, if someone wants to reach out after listening to this, where should they find you?
Sure. Just shoot me an email, Chandra, so Chandra at MillerMN, like Minnesota.com. Or hit me up on LinkedIn. I am not on other social media.
You're not on there's so many new ones, but no, that's great. Thank you so much, Chandra. Thank you for your time. Really, really appreciate it. I learned a lot. I'm sure other people feel the same. So thank you again and excited to see where this takes you. Follow the
Thank
journey.
you. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for all the content that you put out. It's very much appreciated.